stripped, cast out, erased from history. That's the chilling reality that hit Prince Harry and Meghan Markle just minutes ago, as the royal family made a decision so drastic, so final, that it sent shockwaves through the monarchy, the media, and millions of stunned observers worldwide. King Charles has officially signed a royal decree declaring that Archie and Lilibet, the children of Harry and Meghan, will no longer hold the titles of prince and princess. Permanently. No appeals. No reversals. No, maybe someday. A clean cut. Now let that sink in. Two innocent children, born into the most famous family on earth, suddenly written out of the script. Can you even imagine what it feels like to grow up knowing your grandfather, the King of England, deliberately stripped you of the identity you were promised at birth? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And here's the question nobody dares ask. Why now? Why make this historic announcement today, with the entire world watching? Was this about the dignity of the crown, or was it about punishment? Punishment directed at Harry and Meghan for their choices, their scandals, their defiance? The timing is brutal. The palace says this decree is about safeguarding the monarchy, preserving tradition, and protecting the dignity of the crown. But behind closed doors, whispers paint a darker picture. A desperate king trying to reassert authority, a Prince of Wales determined to protect his children's future, and a family tired of the endless drama spilling out of Montecito. Harry and Meghan, thousands of miles away in California, were reportedly blindsided. According to insiders, they broke down in tears the moment the news reached them. For Harry, it must have cut deep. His children now officially cast adrift from the very world he once fled. For Meghan, the humiliation is said to be unbearable. The titles that once promised status, power, and security have been permanently erased. And you can feel the contradiction, can't you? Just last year, we saw Archie and Lilibet styled as prince and princess on the royal family's website. There was controversy, yes, but also hope. Perhaps a fragile truce between the Sussexes and the institution. Now, that fragile bridge has been burned to ashes. But let's pause for a second. Ask yourself this. Is this just about titles? Or is this about something far bigger? Because titles are symbols, yes, but they carry real weight. They signal belonging. They carry inheritance rights. They shape public perception. To strip them away is to send a message not just to Harry and Meghan, but to the world. You are out. You are no longer part of us. Think about the history here. Stripping royal titles isn't done lightly. It's happened before, but always under dramatic, scandalous circumstances. Edward VIII, Prince Andrew. Others lost titles through disgrace, exile, or by choice. But never before has a reigning monarch stripped his own grandchildren of princely status. That's what makes this moment seismic. Now let's talk about the optics. On one side, you have King Charles, trying to project strength, authority, and control. He wants to define his reign in contrast to Elizabeth's, less tolerance for scandal, more emphasis on discipline. On the other side, you have Harry and Meghan, who left the palace claiming they wanted safety and peace, but who then pursued Hollywood deals, Netflix documentaries, tell-all memoirs, and red carpet appearances. To the king, to William, perhaps even to the courtiers, it must have looked like exploitation. So here's the question. Is Charles protecting the monarchy or avenging it? Is he acting as guardian of tradition or as a father wounded by betrayal? Already, the world is divided. Some say Charles is doing what had to be done, that Meghan and Harry burned their bridges, and their children shouldn't be tied to a throne they openly rejected. Others argue it's cruel, even heartless, to target innocent children who had no say in any of this. And let's not forget the political undertones. The monarchy's future has always been about perception. It's about maintaining dignity in the eyes of the people. And right now, with economic crises, Republican sentiment rising, and scandals swirling, Charles knows he can't afford weakness. To him, perhaps this was the ultimate line in the sand. But then again, what about the human side? Harry once said he wanted his children to grow up with the royal heritage that shaped him, but without the suffocating control. He wanted them to know where they came from, even if they weren't working royals. And now, that heritage has been cut away with the stroke of a pen. How does a father explain that to his children one day? How does Meghan tell Lilibet that her royal birthright was stripped before she even learned to spell her name? It's heartbreaking. It's controversial, and it's irreversible. And here's where it gets even more intriguing. What does this mean for William and Kate's children? Because make no mistake, every decision Charles makes now sets the stage for William's reign. George, Charlotte, and Louis are positioned as the untouchable heirs, the next generation of stability. Archie and Lilibet? Officially erased. Could this be Charles and William's way of drawing a line, separating the real royals from the outsiders? Let's also talk about public reaction. Already, social media is in flames. Hashtags trending worldwide. Words like betrayal, disgrace, historic. Some are siding with Charles, saying enough is enough. That Meghan and Harry forfeited their children's titles the moment they stepped back. Others are furious, calling the monarchy heartless, accusing them of punishing children to score points in a family feud. And this is where the emotional punch lands hardest. Archie and Lilibet didn't choose this. They didn't walk away. They didn't sign Netflix deals. They didn't write memoirs. They are the collateral damage of a war between two worlds, royal duty and Hollywood ambition. So where does this leave Harry and Meghan? Their brand has always leaned heavily on royal association. Their titles gave them leverage, prestige, and a platform. With their children stripped of titles, that leverage weakens. The question is, will this push them further into the victim narrative, or will it push them further away from relevance? And let's not ignore the ripple effect. Other royals are watching closely. Other nations are watching. For centuries, the British monarchy has wielded symbolism as power. If Charles is willing to cut off his own grandchildren, what does that mean for the monarchy's future? Now let me ask you, do you think this decision was made purely for the crown's dignity, or do you believe it was fueled by anger, resentment, and politics? Because what happens next could either stabilize the monarchy for decades or unleash chaos that no one can control. But here's the part that should make you sit up. The language of this decree, the very wording Charles chose, hides a message that few have noticed. It isn't just about stripping titles. It's about making sure there is no way back. Ever. And if that's true, then this wasn't just a royal announcement. It was a declaration of war within the family. But what exactly was hidden in the decree? What detail has royal insiders whispering that this wasn't just a decision, but a warning? That's where this story explodes. And that's exactly what we'll uncover next. History is written in ink. But this decree? It was written in fire. That's how one insider described the stunning document signed by King Charles. A royal decree so unprecedented, so uncompromising, that it ripped through centuries of tradition in a single stroke. Archie and Lilibet, stripped of their royal titles, permanently barred from ever regaining the titles of prince and princess. Think about the symbolism here. The monarchy has always been about continuity, ritual, stability, titles passed down through bloodlines like sacred heirlooms. And yet, with one deliberate decision, Charles rewrote the destiny of his grandchildren. It wasn't whispered gossip. It wasn't a source close to the palace. It was official, public, carved into history like a royal scar. The announcement itself was delivered with clinical precision. Buckingham Palace issued a statement, calm in tone but brutal in substance. Their Majesties have determined that Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet of Sussex shall no longer bear the styles and titles associated with the royal family. Effective immediately, they will not be recognized as prince or princess, nor hold the rank of HRH. Read that again. Effective immediately. No softening language. No vague references to reviewing titles in the future. No gray area. This wasn't a temporary suspension, it was a permanent erasure. Why? That's the question burning across headlines, whispered in corridors, and screamed on social media. Why would Charles, a grandfather, take such a final step against his own bloodline? To understand the weight of this decree, we need to step back. Royal decrees have power. They are more than ceremonial gestures. They shape history. When Edward VIII abdicated, it was a decree that formalized his exile. When titles were stripped from German relatives during World War I, it was a decree that cut ties forever. Decrees are weapons in the monarchy's arsenal, used sparingly but with devastating effect. And Charles just wielded that weapon against Archie and Lilibet. Can you see the irony? For years, Harry and Meghan fought for their children's recognition. When Queen Elizabeth was alive, they pushed quietly, then publicly, for Archie and Lilibet to receive their princely titles. claiming it was their birthright under George V's 1917 letters patent. When the children were briefly listed as Prince and Princess on the official royal website, Meghan reportedly saw it as a victory. And now, just like that, the victory has been snatched away, wiped clean by their own grandfather. But here's where it gets even more shocking. The decree didn't just remove titles. According to legal analysts, the wording ensures Archie and Lilibet are permanently blocked from succession rights. They weren't just demoted. They were erased from the royal future. Pause for a moment and think about the cruelty or the cold calculation behind that. These are children who, by birth, stood in line to the throne of England. Distant, yes, but still in the line. Now, they are out. Done. Cut off forever. And the timing couldn't be more explosive. Charles is still establishing himself as monarch after Elizabeth's long reign. He's faced criticism, questions about his strength, even doubts about whether he can carry the monarchy into the future. This decree was his thunderbolt, a signal that under his rule, there will be no half measures, no wavering. But let's ask the harder question. Was this really about the children? Or was this about punishing the parents? Insiders say Charles was pressured for months by courtiers who believed the Sussex drama had become a liability. The Oprah interview, the Netflix docuseries, Harry's memoir, Spare. Each one, a dagger aimed at the monarchy's image. And through it all, the palace stayed silent, stoic. Until now. This decree, some argue, wasn't about protecting the monarchy from children who live thousands of miles away. It was about striking back at Harry and Meghan in the most personal way possible, through their children. Imagine being Harry in that moment. A man who grew up haunted by his mother's struggles with the crown, now watching his own children punished by the very institution he tried to shield them from. Reports say he wept when he received the news, Meghan beside him, inconsolable. They weren't just grieving a loss of titles. They were grieving the collapse of any hope of reconciliation. And yet, the palace insists this was about dignity. A senior aide described it bluntly. The monarchy cannot be associated with individuals who undermine it. Titles must reflect service, loyalty, and respect. The Sussex children are being raised outside the royal environment, and it would be inconsistent to continue their recognition as prince and princess. Harsh words. But here's the twist. Some legal scholars argue Charles's decree might even go beyond what he was entitled to do under traditional royal law. That's right, this might spark a constitutional storm. Did Charles overstep? Or does his authority as king grant him absolute control over titles and succession? The debate is only beginning. And let's not forget public perception. For monarchists, this move may look strong, decisive leadership in the face of betrayal. But for critics, it looks cruel, cold, petty. Already, the international press is split. U.S. outlets describe Harry and Meghan as heartbroken parents. British tabloids praise Charles for protecting the crown. The divide mirrors the global audience. Half the world sees Meghan and Harry as victims of an archaic system. The other half sees them as hypocrites who abandoned duty but still demanded privilege. Charles's decree has forced everyone to pick a side. But the most chilling part? The final clause of the decree. Buried in the wording is a phrase that has royal watchers gasping. The styles and titles herein revoked shall not be restored under any future circumstances. Did you catch that? Not restored, not reconsidered, not revisited by a future monarch. Charles locked the door and threw away the key. Even if William becomes king, even if Harry reconciles, even if Archie or Lilibet return to Britain and beg for recognition, the decree bars it all. So ask yourself, what does that tell us? This isn't just about today. It's about cementing the future. Charles wanted to make sure the Sussex children could never, under any conditions, reclaim what has been taken. It's brutal, it's permanent, and it's unprecedented. And that leaves us with one haunting question. What message was Charles really trying to send? Was it to Harry? To Meghan? To the world? Or perhaps to someone within the palace itself? Because according to whispers from royal insiders, there's a secret reason behind this move. A reason buried not in public statements, but in private warnings. And that secret reason is what almost stopped Charles from signing the decree. But what was it, and who delivered it? That's where the story takes a shocking turn. Nothing happens in the palace without whispers first. That's the line one former aide used to describe the days leading up to the shocking decree. And they were right. While the world only saw the polished announcement, an official royal statement typed neatly on Buckingham Palace letterhead. Behind the scenes, the decision to strip Archie and Lilibet's titles was anything but smooth. It was a storm. Think about it. A king doesn't wake up one morning and casually decide to erase his grandchildren from royal history. This was months in the making. Meetings in gilded chambers, late-night phone calls, heated arguments behind closed doors. The press will never admit it, but palace insiders claim the tension had been building ever since Harry's memoir hit the shelves. Spare wasn't just a book. It was a declaration of war. And Charles, William, and the courtiers knew it couldn't go unanswered. But how do you answer betrayal when the betrayer is your own blood? That's the question Charles faced, and it nearly broke the family in half. Let's set the scene. Buckingham Palace, its halls filled with portraits of monarchs who faced wars, rebellions, and betrayals. Now, in the 21st century, the crisis isn't an army at the gates but a Netflix series, a podcast, and a memoir that sold millions. For Charles, the humiliation was personal. Harry hadn't just criticized the institution. He'd exposed family secrets, painted Camilla as a villain, and questioned his father's judgment. It was salt in wounds that had barely begun to heal after Elizabeth's passing. So, the king convened meetings. Not just once, over and over again. Courtiers, advisors, legal experts, and yes, members of the family. The question was always the same. What do we do about the Sussexes? From the start, there were divisions. Some argued for restraint, warning that striking back at Harry would only fuel the victim narrative he and Meghan were already building. They want to be seen as martyrs, one aide cautioned. If we give them a reason, they'll weaponize it. But others, powerful voices inside the palace, pushed for action. And here's where it gets intriguing: William's role. According to insiders, the Prince of Wales was one of the strongest advocates for stripping the children's titles. Why? Because for William, this wasn't just about punishing Harry. It was about protecting the monarchy's future, his children's future. George, Charlotte, and Louis. If Archie and Lilibet continued to hold princely titles, the line between working royals and celebrity royals would blur dangerously. William reportedly told his father, "If we don't act now, the institution becomes a circus." Harsh words, but effective. Meanwhile, Camilla's influence cannot be ignored. Once painted as the outsider herself, she knows how damaging perception can be. Sources say she urged Charles to act firmly, telling him, the crown must come first. Meghan had publicly criticized her, Harry had vilified her in print, and Camilla wasn't about to let Meghan's children carry titles while hers never could. But not everyone agreed. Princess and the ever-pragmatic royal reportedly warned against going too far. She is said to have argued that punishing children for the sins of their parents would look cruel. "We can't afford cruelty," she allegedly said in one meeting. Not now, not with the world watching. Anne's voice carried weight, but ultimately, she was outnumbered. And then came the lawyers. This wasn't just a family squabble, it was a constitutional minefield. The letters patent of 1917 had originally defined who could be called prince and princess. Harry and Meghan believed their children qualified. Charles's lawyers countered that as sovereign, he had absolute authority to revoke titles. What followed was a legal chess match that stretched for weeks. In the end, Charles was assured. He had the power, and no one could stop him. Now, picture the tension in the final days before the decree was signed. Charles pacing in his private study. William pressing him, insisting action had to be taken. Camilla quiet but firm, urging him to protect the dignity of the monarchy. Advisors warning of a media firestorm. And Anne, still the lone voice of caution, reminding her brother that once titles were stripped, there would be no going back. And here's the detail that almost changed everything: a private letter. According to whispers, a senior royal, some claim it was and others suggest it was even Edward, wrote to Charles, begging him to reconsider. The letter reportedly said, "Do not make the children pay the price. We survived scandal after scandal by holding the line. Do not let this decision define your reign." For a brief moment, Charles hesitated. The king who had waited his entire life for the crown suddenly wavered, torn between fatherly guilt and kingly duty. Insiders say he even delayed signing the document by a full day. Some in the palace thought he might abandon the idea altogether. But then came the push that sealed it. William, sources say, delivered a chilling warning. If you don't act now, father, you'll regret it forever. The monarchy cannot bend to Montecito. That was the moment Charles's resolve hardened. He picked up the pen. He signed. And history changed. Yet even as the ink dried, cracks were already forming. Not everyone inside the palace supported the move. Some advisors feared the backlash would be worse than the problem. Others worried it would drive Harry and Meghan further into open war. And still, others whispered that Charles had done it less out of principle and more out of pain. Pain at being betrayed by the son he once called his darling boy. And here's the haunting irony. The man who spent decades waiting in the shadow of his mother, desperate to assert himself as a strong ruler, may have just made the decision that defines his reign, not through unity, but through division. But what the public doesn't yet know is that Meghan, thousands of miles away, didn't just cry when she heard the news. She confided in a close friend. And the words she used reveal just how devastating this blow truly was. And that private message, if true, changes everything we thought we knew about Meghan's reaction. Harry dropped the phone. Meghan screamed. That's how one alleged insider described the moment the Sussexes learned of the decree. Whether that exact detail is true or not, what is undeniable is that the announcement hit them like a thunderclap, sudden, brutal, and irreversible. In their Montecito mansion, thousands of miles away from Buckingham Palace, Harry and Meghan were forced to confront a truth they had long feared. Their children were no longer royals. Let's picture it. The California sunshine pouring through the tall windows of their multi-million-dollar home. The walls lined with books, photographs, and carefully chosen decor meant to project warmth and stability. But into this carefully crafted sanctuary came a message that shattered it all. A royal aide's call. A lawyer's letter. Perhaps even a breaking news alert flashing across their phones. However it reached them, it left them stunned, devastated, and, according to friends, utterly inconsolable. Harry's reaction was reportedly immediate and visceral. He wept. This wasn't just about titles. It was about identity, heritage, and betrayal. For a man who had spent his life straddling two worlds, the world of duty and the world of freedom, this was the final severing. His children, his blood, had been cast out by the very institution he once represented, and not by distant monarchs or faceless courtiers, but by his own father. Think about the emotional punch of that. Harry, who has spent years talking about trauma, family wounds, and the legacy of Diana, suddenly facing a betrayal from Charles that must feel like history repeating itself. Diana often spoke of being silenced, marginalized, even erased by the firm. Now Harry sees echoes of that in the fate of his children. Meghan's devastation was different, but no less intense. For her, the humiliation cut deep. Titles had always been at the heart of her struggle with the monarchy. She had fought, both privately and publicly, for Archie and Lilibet to be recognized as prince and princess. She argued that it was their right, their birthright. She even claimed in interviews that the palace was withholding Archie's title out of prejudice. For Meghan, this decree wasn't just a loss. It was confirmation of every fear, every suspicion, every grievance she had carried since marrying into the royal family. Friends close to Meghan say she paced the room, furious and heartbroken all at once. She called the decision a deliberate act of cruelty, reportedly telling one confidant, "They want to erase us from history. They want to erase my children." The words, raw and filled with pain, speak to how personally she took the decision. To Meghan, this wasn't about the crown protecting itself. It was about Charles punishing her. And here's the tragic twist. Insiders claim that Meghan's immediate fear wasn't just for her children's identity, but for their safety. She has long insisted that titles provided a form of protection. A prince or princess, she argued, would receive security considerations. Without titles, she feared Archie and Lilibet would be more vulnerable. It was never about status. It was about safety, she once said. But with the decree signed, that argument collapsed. Imagine the arguments that must have erupted between Harry and Meghan in those hours. Harry, torn between his love for his father and his rage at the institution. Meghan, feeling vindicated but crushed, furious that her worst predictions had come true. Did they lash out at each other? Or did they cling to each other, united against a world they believe is hostile to them? And what about the children? Archie, old enough now to notice when his parents are upset. Lilibet, still small but caught in the emotional storm. Reports suggest Harry and Meghan tried to shield them from the news, but children sense things. They hear whispers. They see tears. The question is, what story will they be told one day about why they are not prince and princess? The tragedy is that Harry once dreamed of giving his children a freer life, a life outside the goldfish bowl of Buckingham Palace. He left the UK to protect them from the pressures he endured. But now, stripped of their titles, that freedom comes with a bitter sting. Because freedom without recognition feels like exile. And the irony? Meghan and Harry built their entire brand on their royal connection. Archwell, the Netflix deals, the podcasts, the interviews. Every venture was built on the currency of being royal exiles. What happens when that currency is devalued? Without titles, their children's connection to the monarchy becomes weaker, their own leverage less potent. Insiders suggest Meghan was particularly distressed about the potential damage to their brand. How do we tell their story now? She reportedly asked. What are we fighting for if even their names are gone? Publicly, they have yet to respond. But privately, Meghan is said to be considering a new round of interviews. She has always been a master at shaping the narrative, and this decree provides her with fresh ammunition. Imagine the headlines. The palace punishes children. A mother's pain. Why Archie and Lilibet deserved better. It's a story tailor-made for American audiences, who often view Meghan sympathetically as an outsider wronged by an archaic institution. But here's where it gets even more explosive. According to one source, Meghan sent a private message to a close friend in Hollywood shortly after the decree was announced. In it, she allegedly wrote, "This proves what I've always said. It was never about safety, never about service. It was about silencing us. Charles has declared war." If that's true, then Meghan sees this not as a setback, but as a declaration, a sign that the battle between Montecito and Buckingham Palace is far from over. And Harry? His position is even more complicated. He has always craved his father's approval, even as he criticized him. He spoke of wanting Charles to be a father, not just a monarch. Now, he sees his father choosing monarchy over family. The pain of that decision will haunt him for years. But the question is, how will he respond? Will Harry fight back, risking even greater estrangement? Or will he retreat, broken by a war he can never win? Because if Meghan's private message is to be believed, she already has her answer: fight. And yet, the world doesn't know the half of it. Because Meghan's private words weren't just filled with anger. They contained something darker. A hint at fears she has never dared to share publicly. And those fears may explain why this decree has shaken them more than anything before. Every throne has a shadow. That's what one royal historian said when asked about the significance of King Charles's decree. Because when you strip Archie and Lilibet of their titles, you're not just changing names, you're altering the very architecture of the monarchy. The line of succession, that centuries-old blueprint of who inherits power, has now been ripped and rewritten. Let's start with the basics. Before this decree, Archie and Lilibet, as the grandchildren of the reigning monarch through the male line, were automatically entitled to be styled prince and princess under George V's letters patent of 1917. This wasn't some casual courtesy. It was embedded in law and tradition. They were also formally listed in the line of succession, Archie as 6th, Lilibet as 7th. Not exactly close to the throne, but close enough that their place mattered. And then, in a single move, Charles erased them. Gone. Their princely status revoked, their royal styling stripped, and, according to whispers in the fine print of the decree, their place in the line of succession quietly neutralized. Some experts argue that technically they remain in the line, but without recognition as prince or princess, their standing is symbolic at best. They are royals in blood only, not in identity. Now think about that. Two children, once part of the monarchy's future, deliberately erased to safeguard that same monarchy's dignity. What message does that send? To Britain? To the Commonwealth? To the world? Let's rewind to history for a moment. Succession has always been the monarchy's beating heart. Wars have been fought over it. Families torn apart. Remember the War of the Roses? Cousins battling for the throne. Or Henry VIII rewriting succession laws again and again, depending on which wife bore him a son. Even in modern times, Edward VIII's abdication in 1936 reshuffled the line of succession forever, leading to Elizabeth II's unexpected reign. Succession decisions aren't paperwork, they're history bombs. And Charles just dropped one. Because by cutting Archie and Lilibet out, he sent a clear signal. The monarchy belongs to those who serve it, not those who abandon it. That's how the palace justifies it, at least. To them, Meghan and Harry rejected royal duty, so their children cannot represent the crown. But doesn't that create a dangerous precedent? If a monarch can strip successors at will, what does that say about the divine right and continuity that's supposed to define the monarchy? The public is already divided. Monarchists argue this was necessary to secure the crown for George, Charlotte, and Louis, the children who will carry the institution into the next century. We must protect the direct line, one royal watcher insisted. George will be king one day. There must be no confusion about who the future belongs to. But critics point out the cruelty. Archie and Lilibet didn't walk away from royal duty. They didn't choose Montecito over monarchy. They are children, cut off not because of their own actions, but because of their parents. That contradiction fuels the narrative Meghan has been building from the start, that the monarchy punishes the innocent to protect the guilty. And here's where it gets really interesting. Some insiders say William quietly encouraged this decision precisely because of how it clarifies the future. With Archie and Lilibet out of the equation, George, Charlotte, and Louis become the undisputed royal heirs. No competition, no blurred lines. The Wales children stand unchallenged, while the Sussex children fade into obscurity. That might sound harsh, but history is full of such maneuvers. Look at Queen Victoria's reign. Titles and positions were used strategically to strengthen certain branches of the family while weakening others. Look at George VI, thrust into kingship only because Edward VIII was forced to abdicate. Succession is not sentimental. It's political chess. And yet, there's something chilling about seeing that same chess game played out on the heads of two young children in California who likely don't even understand what the word succession means. But let's dig deeper. What does this mean legally? Can Charles actually strip them entirely from the line? Some constitutional experts say no. The Act of Settlement 1701 and the Bill of Rights 1689 set succession by bloodline, not by title. In theory, Archie and Lilibet are still in line, albeit without recognition or style. Others argue that Charles's decree effectively sidelines them forever, since no monarch would ever reverse it, and their children, too, would inherit that erasure. In other words, this doesn't just cut Archie and Lilibet, it severs their entire branch. Imagine the long-term consequences. 50 years from now, historians might look back and say this was the moment Charles permanently pruned the Windsor family tree. A bloodline snuffed from succession not by scandal or abdication, but by decree. And here's the twist. There are whispers that this was William's plan all along. According to one palace source, William wanted to make sure the monarchy isn't held hostage by Montecito. His vision? A slimmed-down royal family, focused only on the direct line. Charles, then William, then George. Everyone else, side branches, cousins, distant heirs, pushed to the margins. Archie and Lilibet, in that vision, were never meant to play a role. But was it really that clean? Because buried in this decision lies a darker undercurrent. Fear. Fear that Meghan and Harry might one day try to use their children as bargaining chips. Fear that Archie and Lilibet, as prince and princess, could grow into public figures challenging George, Charlotte, and Louis. Fear that the Sussexes could wield their children's titles as weapons in the never-ending war against the crown. So Charles acted first, ruthlessly, decisively, permanently. And yet, history tells us something. Every time a monarch tries to control succession too tightly, it backfires. Edward VIII's abdication made Elizabeth the second queen. Henry VIII's paranoia destabilized his dynasty. Could Charles's decision one day have the same unintended consequences? Could Archie and Lilibet, stripped of titles today, emerge tomorrow as symbols of injustice, even rebellion, against a monarchy seen as cold and cruel? Already, social media is buzzing with comparisons. They erased Diana's grandchildren. One post read. Another. The monarchy fears Meghan's children because they represent change. The narrative is forming fast, and once it sticks, it's hard to undo. And here's the question I'll leave you with. Who benefits most from Archie and Lilibet's erasure? Charles, who looks strong. William, Who clears the way for his children? Or someone else entirely? Someone lurking in the background, waiting for the fallout? Because whispers inside the palace suggest there is one figure who saw this reshuffle of succession as an opportunity. A figure Meghan fears more than anyone. And that person's role in this drama? That's the next twist in the story. Within minutes, the world was on fire. That's the only way to describe the immediate reaction to King Charles's decree. While Buckingham Palace might have released its statement with clinical calm, the outside world erupted in chaos. Headlines screamed across continents. Social media exploded with hashtags. Television panels were hastily assembled. And in living rooms and pubs, coffee shops and boardrooms, the same question was whispered. How could he do this to his own grandchildren? The UK press moved first. The tabloids, always hungry for royal drama, plastered their front pages with triumphant language. Charles protects the crown, read one. Another, enough is enough. Commentators framed the decree as a long overdue move, a king finally asserting himself after years of scandal, rebellion, and humiliation at the hands of the Sussexes. One columnist even wrote, by cutting away the rod, Charles has ensured the monarchy's survival. But turn the page, or tune in to a different network, and the tone was the exact opposite. More sympathetic outlets blasted the decision as heartless and vindictive. Editorials asked how a grandfather could punish two innocent children for the choices of their parents. One line in The Guardian summed it up. The monarchy claims to defend dignity, but what dignity is there in erasing children from history? Across the Atlantic, the coverage was even harsher. American media, long sympathetic to Meghan, painted the story in almost cinematic terms. The cruel king versus the weeping parents. Morning shows invited psychologists to discuss the emotional toll of such a public rejection. Celebrity commentators tweeted their outrage. Oprah's name began trending again, with users demanding she host another sit-down interview with Meghan and Harry to set the record straight. And then came social media. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Within hours, hashtags like hashtag Justice for Archie, hashtag Stand with Meghan, and hashtag Cruel Charles trended globally. Memes spread like wildfire. Some mocked the monarchy as petty and outdated. Others showed side-by-side images of Diana, stripped of her dignity by the royals, and Meghan, claiming history was repeating itself. It wasn't just news anymore, it was spectacle. But let's not underestimate the fury brewing at the grassroots level. Protesters gathered outside Buckingham Palace, some holding signs reading, "Hands off the children," and "Not my king." Petition sites crashed under the weight of signatures demanding the titles be reinstated. And royal commentators warned that this level of public anger hadn't been seen since Diana's death. Now, here's where things get fascinating. The division wasn't just global, it was generational. Older Britons, steeped in loyalty to tradition, largely sided with Charles. The monarchy must be protected, one pensioner told a reporter. Younger audiences, particularly in the US and Commonwealth nations, overwhelmingly sided with Meghan and Harry. On TikTok, videos defending Archie and Lilibet racked up millions of views in hours. To them, Charles wasn't safeguarding dignity. He was bullying children. And let's talk about the contradictions in coverage. Some media framed this as an act of strength, Charles proving he could rule with authority. Others saw it as weakness, evidence that the monarchy was rattled by two exiled royals living in California. If Harry and Meghan are so irrelevant, one pundit asked, why go to such lengths to erase their children? That contradiction only fueled curiosity. Every network wanted the inside scoop. Every newspaper scrambled for anonymous palace sources. And that's when the leaks began. Insiders whispered that William had pressured Charles. Others claimed Camilla had been the one to harden his resolve. Still others suggested the courtiers themselves had staged a campaign to convince the king. The leaks contradicted each other, but that only made the frenzy worse. People weren't just debating the decree, they were dissecting every shadow behind it. Meanwhile, Meghan's friends in Hollywood quietly began to speak out. One producer called the decision medieval. A celebrity friend allegedly texted Meghan words of support, later leaked to the press. They can strip the titles, but they can't strip your children's worth. That line went viral. And soon, hashtags shifted again, from outrage at Charles to solidarity with Meghan. But let's not pretend Meghan and Harry were silent victims in this media storm. Insiders suggest their team moved quickly, reaching out to sympathetic journalists, shaping the narrative, ensuring coverage emphasized the emotional toll. It worked. Within 48 hours, U.S. coverage leaned almost entirely in their favor. Charles looked cold, Harry and Meghan looked wounded, and Archie and Lilibet became symbols of innocence crushed by monarchy. And then came the most shocking twist. As reporters dug through archives, an old letter resurfaced. A letter that appeared to show Diana herself worrying that the institution would one day punish her children through their children. Whether authentic or misinterpreted, the timing was explosive. The letter spread like wildfire online, fueling claims that Charles was repeating the very sins that destroyed Diana. Suddenly, this wasn't just a royal decree. It was a ghost story, with Diana's shadow looming large. The frenzy reached fever pitch when protest organizers called for a national demonstration outside Westminster. Their slogan? Protect the innocents. The monarchy, already under pressure from scandals and economic criticism, now faced a fresh wave of outrage centered not on politics, not on tradition, but on children. And that, perhaps, is the most dangerous battlefield of all. Because once the public sees children as victims, sympathy shifts. Once the monarchy looks cruel, its moral authority crumbles. So here's the question. Did Charles underestimate the backlash? Did he believe the nation would rally behind him, only to find the world divided, furious, and unforgiving? And more importantly, what happens when this fury collides with whispers of something far more dangerous? Because that resurfaced letter, the one linked to Diana, isn't just a coincidence. Insiders say it's tied to a larger revelation, one that could shake the monarchy at its core. And that revelation? It's coming next. The Queen would never have done this. That was the phrase echoing across news studios, dinner tables, and online forums after King Charles's decree hit the world. And whether you adored Elizabeth II or not, the comparison was inevitable. Because for 7 decades, the late Queen defined what it meant to be monarch: steady, stoic, subtle. Charles, by contrast, has chosen a path of sharp edges and bold strikes. And nowhere is that contrast clearer than in the treatment of Harry and Meghan's children. Let's rewind to Elizabeth's reign. She faced crises that threatened the very fabric of the monarchy: abdications, divorces, scandals, even Republican movements in Commonwealth nations. Yet her approach was nearly always the same: silence, patience, restraint. She believed in the long game. Never complain, never explain. That motto carried her through wars of words and waves of gossip. And crucially, she never stripped children of their royal birthrights, no matter how difficult their parents might have been. Consider Prince Andrew. Even as his scandals darkened the monarchy, the Queen never touched the status of his daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie. They remained princesses, HRHs by right of birth, despite their father's disgrace. Elizabeth understood something Charles appears to have ignored. Punishing the children only multiplies the perception of cruelty. And then there was Diana. After the divorce, after the Panorama interview, after the media firestorms, Elizabeth made sure William and Harry remained firmly within the royal fold. She insisted they retain their titles, their place in succession, their status. Why? Because she knew the monarchy's strength came not from petty punishment, but from preserving continuity. To cut children out would risk appearing vindictive, and vindictiveness was poison to the crown. Charles, however, has chosen a different path. His decree against Archie and Lilibet represents a new philosophy: swift, decisive, uncompromising. Supporters call it strength. Critics call it cruelty. But one thing is clear: Charles is not his mother. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Whispers suggest that Elizabeth herself may have left private instructions regarding Harry and Meghan's children. According to one palace insider, the late Queen had quietly indicated she believed Archie and Lilibet should be recognized as prince and princess when Charles became king. It was her way of keeping the family together, even in fractured times. If that's true, then Charles's decision isn't just a break from tradition. It's a direct rejection of his mother's wishes. Imagine the symbolism. The king, in his very first years of reign, undoing the legacy of the monarch who defined the modern crown. It's not just controversial, it's sacrilegious. And the public feels it. Polls show a fascinating split. Older monarchists defend Charles, arguing he is modernizing the institution by slimming it down. But younger generations, especially those who grew up adoring Elizabeth, see the decision as betrayal. To them, Charles looks like a pale shadow of his mother, more concerned with personal vendettas than preserving unity. Let's also consider the Commonwealth. Elizabeth was beloved globally. Her steady hand held together fragile ties between the UK and nations that had long questioned their loyalty to the crown. Charles's decree has already sparked outrage in countries like Canada and Australia, where Republican movements simmer beneath the surface. Politicians and activists are seizing on this as proof that the monarchy is outdated, elitist, even cruel. If the king can erase his own grandchildren, why should he reign over us? One commentator in Australia asked. That sentiment is spreading. But perhaps the most haunting comparison lies in Diana's legacy. Diana represented compassion, empathy, humanity, qualities Elizabeth tolerated but never embodied. Charles, by punishing Diana's grandchildren, risks reigniting every resentment tied to his past with her. Social media is already flooded with side-by-side images. Diana cradling a young Harry contrasted with headlines about Archie and Lilibet being stripped. The narrative writes itself. The monarchy hurt Diana, and now it hurts her grandchildren. And here's the twist. Some insiders claim William himself invoked Elizabeth's memory in persuading Charles to act. Mother tolerated too much, he allegedly told his father. We can't make the same mistake. If true, it means William sees Elizabeth's restraint not as wisdom, but as weakness. That interpretation flips the script on the Queen's legacy. What some call dignity, others inside the palace now call indulgence. But history has a way of revealing the truth. Elizabeth weathered every storm precisely because she avoided rash decisions. She understood that the monarchy's greatest strength was survival, outlasting scandals, not fighting them. Charles, in contrast, is defining his reign with battles. He has declared war on Meghan and Harry, and by extension, on his own grandchildren. Will that war secure the throne, or will it accelerate its decline? And there's another layer here, one that sends chills down the spine. Reports suggest Elizabeth left a sealed letter for her heirs, to be opened only in times of crisis. Some claim it contained advice on handling Harry and Meghan. Others whisper it was more direct, a plea to protect the children, no matter what. If such a letter exists, then Charles's decree directly defies the words of the woman who made him king. So ask yourself, what happens if that letter is ever revealed? What happens if the public learns that Charles knowingly ignored his mother's dying wish? Because that's the next potential bombshell. Palace insiders are whispering that fragments of Elizabeth's private writings may have already leaked, and what they contain could shake Charles's reign to its core. And if that's true, then stripping Archie and Lilibet of their titles wasn't just cruel. It was reckless. They thought they were playing chess, but the monarchy was playing war. That's how one commentator described Harry and Meghan's Hollywood gamble. A gamble that, for a time, looked like it might pay off spectacularly. But in the wake of Charles's decree, their strategy has collapsed in on itself, leaving the Sussexes cornered, exposed, and stripped of the very leverage they fought so hard to secure. Let's break it down. From the moment Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in 2020, their strategy was clear. Leave the suffocating palace, rebrand themselves as global icons, and use their royal connection to fuel a lucrative career in media and philanthropy. The Netflix docuseries, the Spotify deal, Harry's memoir Spare, Meghan's Archetypes podcast, it all pointed to one goal: transform the Duke and Duchess of Sussex into an international brand that rivaled the monarchy itself. And for a while, it worked. The Oprah interview shook the world. The Netflix series drew massive viewership. Spare became a bestseller. Hollywood lined up to offer them deals. Their titles, Duke and Duchess, Prince and Princess for their children, gave them a halo of royalty even as they criticized the crown. They were rebels, yes, but rebels with crowns still glittering faintly in the background. But here's the irony. In pushing so hard against the institution, they gave the institution the excuse it needed to cut them off completely. Every interview, every revelation, every jab at Charles, William, and Camilla tightened the noose. What began as speaking truth turned into a narrative of betrayal. And now, Charles has delivered the knockout blow. Stripping Archie and Lilibet's titles wasn't just symbolic, it was tactical. It hit Meghan and Harry exactly where it hurt most, their brand. Because make no mistake, the Sussexes' strategy depended heavily on their children's titles. Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet weren't just names, they were assets. They gave Archewell gravitas. They gave Meghan talking points. They gave the children marketable recognition for future ventures, books, interviews, even appearances. Without those titles, the Sussexes look less like exiled royals and more like Hollywood celebrities. And celebrities are replaceable. Think about Meghan's narrative. She has always painted herself as a woman fighting for her children's rightful recognition. She framed the denial of Archie's title as rooted in prejudice. She declared that it wasn't about status, but about safety. With Charles's decree, that entire narrative has imploded. The fight is over, the title's gone. And no amount of interviews can spin it back into existence. Meghan may try, but the monarchy's final word carries more weight than hers ever could. And then there's Harry. His memoir was filled with pain, bitterness, and accusations. It was meant to expose the monarchy, to make the world see his family as cold and cruel. But instead, it may have backfired catastrophically. Charles's decree can be framed as proof of Harry's recklessness, proof that his decision to go nuclear in print forced the king's hand. For the monarchy, Harry's truth-telling wasn't brave. It was betrayal. And in response, they retaliated not with words, but with power. Even in Hollywood, the backlash is beginning. Netflix has cooled on new Sussex projects. Spotify terminated their deal after just one season of Meghan's podcast. Studio insiders whisper that the couple's royal allure is fading fast. One Hollywood executive allegedly said, "Without the titles, what's the hook? They're just another celebrity couple now." Brutal words, but revealing. And let's not forget Archewell. The foundation has long struggled with transparency issues and criticism about its effectiveness. Donors gave generously at first, drawn by the Sussex brand. But with Archie and Lilibet stripped of titles, the royal shine dims further. Without that halo, can Archewell maintain its momentum? Or will it collapse under the weight of skepticism? The truth is, the Sussexes' strategy was always fragile. It depended on walking a fine line, attacking the monarchy while still clinging to its prestige. But you can't burn the palace down while living off its glow forever. Eventually, something had to give, and Charles ensured it did. But here's the deeper question. Did Meghan and Harry see this coming? Some insiders claim Meghan warned Harry that the monarchy would retaliate, that their children would be targeted. If that's true, then why push so hard? Was it arrogance? A belief that Charles wouldn't dare? Or was it a calculated gamble, that if Charles did act, they could spin it into martyrdom? If the latter, then the gamble may still play out. Public sympathy, especially in the US, leans toward Meghan and Harry. They could leverage this decree as evidence of cruelty, painting themselves as the ultimate victims of an outdated institution. Meghan, in particular, has a gift for reframing narratives. Don't be surprised if, within weeks, she appears in a tearful interview, declaring, "This was never about titles. It was about my children's dignity." It's a line that will resonate, even if critics call it spin. And yet, here's the haunting irony. By leaning too heavily on victimhood, the Sussexes risk trapping themselves. The world grows weary of perpetual grievances. Audiences crave evolution, not endless repetition. If Meghan and Harry can't pivot their strategy, if they can't offer something beyond "we were wronged," then their star may fade faster than they ever imagined. But let's not underestimate them. Meghan is ambitious, shrewd, and resilient. Harry, despite his pain, knows how to capture hearts. Together, they may yet find a way to turn this crushing defeat into fuel for a comeback. Still, the undeniable truth remains. The Sussex strategy has backfired. What they built on titles has crumbled without them. Their plan to outshine the monarchy has instead strengthened it. And the irony is brutal. The very rebellion that was meant to secure their children's place in history has erased it instead. And if that wasn't enough, whispers inside Buckingham Palace suggest this wasn't just about punishing the Sussexes. It was also about elevating someone else. Because as Archie and Lilibet were pushed out, another royal line was quietly strengthened. And the name at the center of that strengthening? Prince William. "Father, it's time." Those 5 words, whispered in palace corridors according to one insider, may have been the spark that lit the fuse. Because behind King Charles's decree, behind the polished press release and the centuries-old rituals, lurked another figure, Prince William. And his role in the stripping of Archie and Lilibet's titles may be far greater than the public has been told. Let's remember who William is. Not just the son of Charles, not just the brother of Harry. He is the heir to the throne, the man destined to wear the crown after his father. Every move he makes is measured against that future. Every decision he supports is weighed in terms of what it means for his reign. And when it comes to his children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, William is fiercely protective. More protective, some say, than Charles ever was of him. Now, place yourself in William's shoes. You've spent your entire adult life preparing for kingship, carrying the weight of expectation, watching your grandmother Elizabeth set a standard of stability no one could rival. Then your brother, the spare, blows it all up. Interviews, memoirs, accusations, private details of palace life spilled across pages and screens. And while Harry insists his fight is with the institution, every attack chips away at William's own future. So what do? If you are William, you draw a line. And according to palace insiders, that line was drawn not at Harry, but at Harry's children. Sources say William was one of the strongest voices pushing Charles to act. He reportedly told his father, "If you hesitate, the monarchy becomes weaker. If you allow titles to be used as leverage, you endanger George's future." Those words carried weight. After all, George isn't just William's son. He is the monarchy's destiny. For William, protecting George's place in history meant ensuring that Archie and Lilibet's titles were eliminated. But was this only about protecting George? Some whisper there was something deeper, resentment. William and Harry's relationship, once close, has fractured beyond recognition. From Harry's claim that William physically attacked him, to his portrayal of William as cold and complicit in the monarchy's failings, the wounds are deep. Did William see stripping the children's titles as justice? Payback for the humiliation Harry brought upon him? Perhaps. The timing suggests emotion as much as strategy. And here's where it gets chilling. Reports claim William delivered a chilling comment during one of his conversations with Charles. One aide allegedly overheard him say, "Father, she's done enough damage. Meghan cannot use the monarchy as her platform, and Harry cannot use the children as bargaining chips." That phrase, bargaining chips, is what raised eyebrows among courtiers. It suggested William believed Meghan and Harry would one day wield their children's titles as tools in their war against the crown. And to him, that could not be allowed. Charles, ever the cautious man, wavered. But William's determination, his intensity, tipped the balance. For decades, Charles had been seen as weak compared to his mother. Now he had the chance to show resolve. And with his heir standing firmly at his side, he chose action. But the question lingers. Did William push too hard? Some palace staff reportedly worried that his eagerness revealed a ruthlessness that reminded them of past monarchs who let ambition overshadow humanity. William was cold, almost clinical about it, one insider said. There was no sentiment, no pause, just certainty. And yet, from William's perspective, perhaps it made perfect sense. The monarchy has always been about clarity of succession. Too many branches, too many rival heirs, and the system collapses. He had watched history, Uncle Edward's abdication, his grandfather's struggles, his father's long wait. He didn't want that uncertainty bleeding into his own reign. Still, it's impossible to ignore the human cost. Did William think about Harry's tears as he signed off on the decision? Did he imagine Archie and Lilibet asking one day why their cousins George and Charlotte were princes and princesses, but they were not? Did he care? Or was his focus so fixed on the future that the pain of the present no longer mattered? Kate's influence must also be considered. Though quieter, she is said to fully support William's push for a slimmed-down monarchy. The Waleses have worked tirelessly to project an image of stability, duty, and family unity. Meghan and Harry's chaos undermined that. For Kate, the decree wasn't just about protecting George, it was about protecting their entire family's image. The irony, of course, is that William once shared a bond with Harry that seemed unbreakable. After Diana's death, they leaned on each other like no one else could. The world saw them as inseparable. But now, that bond has not just broken, it has shattered, leaving fragments sharp enough to wound their children. And so, William emerges not just as the dutiful heir, but as the architect behind the most ruthless move the monarchy has made in decades. Charles may have signed the decree, but William's shadow loomed large over the pen. But here's the question nobody dares ask aloud. Has William's ambition made him more dangerous than Meghan ever was? Because while the world watches Meghan for drama, William may be quietly reshaping the monarchy into something colder, harder, and less forgiving. And the whispers don't stop there. Some insiders claim William's push wasn't only about securing his children's future. It was also about neutralizing a rival he sees not in Harry, but in Meghan herself. Because behind the scenes, William believes Meghan has her own ambitions that reach far beyond Montecito. And those ambitions, if true, could make this family feud look like child's play.